Good morning. My name is Mike Reagan. I'm the chair of the Family Practice Advisory Committee, and I'll be chairing this meeting. It is 10:04 by my clock, so we'll call that the start for this June 16th Family Practice Advisory Committee being called to order. This meeting is being held via video conference. Please be aware that although we are meeting virtually, this meeting is still being broadcast via the internet. Before I begin, I would like to take this opportunity to welcome those joining us via Zoom and ask that they observe the following etiquette. Please state your name before you speak, mute your microphone when you're not speaking, and keep background noise to a minimum. Members will begin with a traditional roll call to ensure that we have a quorum. When I call your name, please respond to confirm that you are on the call. Okay, here we go. Ruth Chambers. Todd Dorton. Louis Foxhall.
Present.
Brett Johnson. Mark Nadeau.
I'm present. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning. Fred Unger.
Present.
Martin Ortega. Damon Strands.
Present.
Dana Sprudy.
Here. Good morning.
Good morning. Zoe Wang.
Present.
Awesome. Eric Warwick. And me, I'm here. So it looks like we've got a quorum, Ernest.
That is correct, sir. Thank you.
Okay, so please record that in the minutes. Members, to ensure we maintain a quorum, keep your cameras turned on during the duration. So we want to see your bright, smiling faces. I know it's tempting to go dark, but don't do it. Keep that camera going. All right. So at this time, we'll have the coordinating board staff and invited guests to also introduce themselves to the committee. So, Ernest, you want to start?
Yes, sir. Good morning. My name is Ernest Hawkins, Program Director for Family Practice Residency Program here at the Coordinating Board.
Good morning. This is Reinhold Cornelius. I'm with the Coordinating Board in Academic Health Academic and Health Affairs.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Stacy Silverman, Assistant Commissioner for Academic and Health Affairs at the Coordinating Board. It's great to see everyone.
Hi, I'm Cindy Fisher. I'm Program Director, Academic Health and I did the same thing Arnold did, sorry. Academic and Health Affairs, and I'm on with the GME expansion grants.
And I think we're Cindy Passmore. You're muted.
Yes, hi, it's Cindy Passmore with the Faculty Development Center at the University of North Texas Health Science Center at Texas College of Osteopathic Medicine in Fort Worth. Good to see everybody.
Very good. Did we get everybody? Looks like maybe we did. Okay, great. I'm going to move us on to our next item of business. And the first agenda item is approval of the minutes from previous meetings. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes from the April 14th, 2021 committee meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Okie doke. So it looks like Damon moved it and I heard Mark jump in quick on the second. Any discussions or changes need to be made to those minutes? Okay. All those in favor say aye or wave your hands, give a thumbs up.
Aye.
Very good. Anybody opposed? So those minutes are approved. So we'll move down to the next agenda item, which is new program eligibility. This is probably one of the bigger items we'll talk about today. So agenda item 3 is consideration and possible action to approve the FPRAC fiscal year 2022 eligibility for family medicine programs funded under the GME expansion programs. This is an action item. Ernest, the program director for the academic health affairs will provide an update on program eligibility for consideration and approval for fiscal year 2022 funding, and will be available to answer questions. So Ernest, you ready to go? You got some slides.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. So new program eligibility. This year we have one program up for consideration. This program is the Texas Institute for Graduate Medical Education and Research, TIGMR, the Laredo Medical Center program in Laredo, Texas. The program start date was July 1st of 2018, and will be eligible as of July 1st of 2021. So that means they will be eligible for funding consideration starting September 1st. They would have been in operation for 36 months, which is one of the main requirements for approval. And they bring to the table 24 residents at full complement. And the rest of this chart here, or table here, lists several other programs that would come online in the next couple of years. So I wanted to put that out there for you guys to make you aware that we'd be adding potentially 138 residents in the next 4 to 5 years. The last program, which is in El Paso, is not in operation yet, but research indicates that they might have a class starting this year. I wasn't able to confirm that, but so they will not play into the mix in the next couple of years, but in the near future would have at least 18 residents also eligible for funding should the committee decide to add them aboard as well. With that, I'll turn it over to you, Dr. Reagan.
Okay, well, so, I think it's a good kind of lay of the land to see where we're headed, what will be coming forward in the future, and where we sit today. And so, does anybody have any questions for Ernest? Any discussion?
Just to kind of give you a little bit of background about Laredo. So they initially applied and were awarded back in the 16-17 award cycle. Apparently they had some accreditation issues and were not ready to open. They pushed back their opening date a couple times. And we're once again eligible in the 18-19 funding cycle. But at that time, GME was only awarding continuing programs. So they were not subsequently awarded. So they were kind of left kind of hanging in limbo. So I know the agenda item says they're part of the GME program. They are not. So they are not receiving GME expansion dollars as of today. So, and I don't think they will in the future either. So this program is kind of different. Although they were eligible, they did not participate and are not participating.
Ernest,
Good point.
Dr. Trans, real quick. The HCA Medical City Arlington program, there's 54 approved residents. Are all those going to be family medicine?
According to ACGME, yes, these are the ACGME approved residents for that family medicine program.
Wow.
It's a big program, isn't it?
Yeah.
If I could just be the master of the obvious here, we've got, and I think we should fund these. I don't think there's any dispute about that probably, but it just dilutes the amount that each slot gets. And I think that affects everybody. I just wanted to, I guess.
Absolutely. Yes, that's the classic issue is we're adding, over the next several years, we'll add 138 positions. That will definitely dilute the numbers. Ernest and I, in preparing for the meeting, talked about this quite a bit. And the tradition has been to add programs, especially those. It seems to be slightly easier if they don't have expansion funds. That question of double dipping, which is something we'll probably have to talk about as well. Getting expansion money and this money, how do we feel about that? But in this particular instance, Ernest is saying they're not getting the expansion money, and they are due to be on cycle to be included. I would say that Ernest gave me a little bit of insight into kind of the world in Austin and the oversight of their organization. And, I think there is an interest in keeping the funding pretty stable and at a kind of a threshold level. And so this impact, I don't know, is gonna pull us down below that threshold level. But I think that certainly has been the tradition, as you said, Mark, that we accept these and add them. Any other discussion from the committee?
Yeah, I was just, this Lewis Fox, I was just curious if you could remind me of our current number of programs and trainees that are funded.
We currently have 34 programs being funded, and we funded 880 residents this last year, which was an increase of 3 programs and 58 residents over the last biennium. So over the last 2 to 3 years, we've added 7 programs total, and a little over
What time
60
period was
residents.
that?
Excuse me?
What was the time period for the 7 new programs?
Over the last biennium. So we added 7 programs beginning 2020. We added 4, and this last year we added 3 more.
Okay.
Do you think would it be too hard to do like a little chart with the number of programs and trainees over the last several years? Just, it might be helpful to kind of, if we're sharing this with our friends in Austin. Just,
You know, we've had that data before. That's a good point.
if we could just kind of put it in a little, you know, time chart there, it might be easier to kind of.
Ernest, do you have those previous graphs that we used?
I do. Let me put one up. This is the historical one that we've used and we've seen over the year. It doesn't include the number of programs, but it does have number of residents and the per resident amount over the last 20 years. So let me get that put up right quick.
And this is Dina Spridi. I just had a comment just to kind of to tag on to Mark's comment as well too. Is there any opportunity to go back to the legislature to show the, you know, additional slots being added and request any additional funding for GME?
So absolutely, we should do that. I think that's been an effort by the TAFP. I think you can look at the data here and see a gradual trend downward on the per resident amount. And we're going to see that continue probably as these new programs come on. I think there's a good story to be made for trying to increase the support.
Yeah, it might be useful to just kind of project this chart on out over the next few years as we anticipate those additional programs, what impact that might have on the per resident funding. Just so
absolutely
those that care about it can see.
And, you know, it is fun to look at numbers. And if you add, I think it was around 130 new residents, we're going to be getting close to 1,000 family medicine residents, aren't we?
Correct. That'll put us over the 1,000 mark. Right now we are at the bubble of the 5,000, or, you know, toying with the $5,000 per resident amount. Adding the additional 138 over the next couple of years would surely put us under that 5,000 per resident amount.
Yeah.
So something to consider.
Yeah, the other mental exercise is to project what it would take to get us back up to that 14,000 level that we were at.
I think last calculation, it would be anywhere between 10 million and $13 million per year.
Annually.
Yes, sir. Annually, correct.
Wishful thinking, I know, but hey.
Well, all good thoughts though, in terms of, I mean, you can't, if you don't aim for a target, you don't get anything. And so I think it's a good idea to be thinking about that from our lobbying platforms that we can use to try and push that forward.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is the money's got to come from somewhere. So now it's on, you know, us to figure out how to get it funded from some other source. Typically it's locally, right?
And that's hard going, I know, trying to squeeze money out because everybody's capped out generally, unless it's a new hospital potentially. And so it's pretty hard. I'm going to circle us back to talking specifically about the question of adding the Texas Institute for Graduate Medical Education and Research, TIGMR, Laredo program for 2022 funding. Any other discussion specifically about that?
Can I ask a quick question about that chart?
Sure.
What was causing the big drop between 2017 and 2018? Because it was quite drastic.
Can you put it back up, Ernest?
Yes, sir. Just one second. Zoom is starting to act a little weird.
Modern problems, right?
Okay, that should be on the screen now.
So are you saying the big drop 2012, 2013, or between 17 and 18?
2017 and 18. What caused that?
That
Stacey, do
was
you want
also-
to answer? Or Ernest, go ahead. Go ahead.
That was a reduction in funding by the legislature. I think we went from 10 million down to 5 million. That biennium, and it's the same similar trend back in 2012, 2013. That was about a 44% reduction. So it's seen some big ups and downs over the last 10 years.
You know, one of the obvious questions is what was the impact of those big cuts? And we probably ought to have a good answer for that as we go and try and advocate. It was brutal back then, but some data would be helpful. I don't know that I have that off the top of my head, but that's probably worth researching a little bit.
Agreed.
Yes, sir. We could surely look into that and
Program
get that
closures
information.
and loss of positions, you know, that kind
Yes,
of
sir.
thing. Yep. Good question, though. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, I have to step away for a sec.
I'm hoping that's just a sec. So any other discussion related to the addition of Laredo?
You need a motion to approve? If so, I
I
make one.
do. You'll make one. So Mark's going to
Yes.
make a motion to approve.
And I'll second.
Damon is seconding. I think we need to get Lewis back to vote, don't we? Or do we?
Yes, we do, sir.
Okay. The anxiety of Zoom meetings. Have y'all seen the, I saw it this weekend, the goats on a Zoom meeting yet? Have you had a goat pop into your Zoom meeting? There's this farm in England, and they'll for $7 you can book a goat to appear at your meeting. And they hold these cameras up to these goats. It is really kind of funny. It's got just random, you know, but kind of funny. Lewis is back. All right. So we have a motion and a second to approve the Laredo program. All those in favor say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Looks like the motion passes. So thank you for that. Now, at the pleasure of the committee, Cindy Fisher is with us, and so we can get a GME update if y'all would like. I think it'd be nice just to kind of hear that. Cindy, are you prepared to do that for us?
I can. Currently, we are in verification process for the year 21, verifying all the positions. There are going to be some changes. Some programs were delayed, some COVID issues. So we'll lose some positions a little bit, but I think we're on track to go ahead and spend all the money that we were allocated for fiscal year 2021. So we're supporting about 2,000 residents in the GME expansion grant program. So, and unfortunately, as we reach our goal of meeting the 1.1 to 1, you know, and the planning grants, we are encouraging growth and opening new programs. And so this is going to involve more family medicine programs. So Ernest and I met, and we talked about what was upcoming and what's coming out of our planning grants. But we do have another planning grant award that's in the award recommendation phase now. So hopefully that awards announcement will be made soon. And so, we have more initiatives of growing programs. And so this is likely to affect this group and the family medicine group as well. So it's been good for the expansion program of meeting that goal, but unfortunately it affects this funding as well. Stacy, did you have anything to add to the GME update?
No, you did a great job. Well, one thing to add is that the legislature did fund that program. So if you have residents that are funded through the GME expansion effort, those positions will be maintained. And the funding also allows for the establishment of some new positions in hopes that the state remains at that 1.1 to 1 ratio for the next couple of years, which is
Good.
a positive.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. We want to be positive for sure, so we can draw some folks from other places to come to Texas. Why not? It's a great place to be. Okay, well, thank you for those updates. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
I'm going to move us down to another important item of business, the FY 2022 funding scenarios. And this will be familiar for the committee members who've been on the committee for a while. We'll have to allocate that funding around various programs. And so Ernest is going to provide us with some funding scenarios with potential recommendations, and then we'll walk through that. So Ernest, are you ready to go?
Yes, sir. Okay, just to kind of give you a recap of how fiscal year 2021 will end. The total appropriation was $5 million. In November, we had a reallocation of $17,102.62. And that was distributed amongst the Rural Rotation Program and Faculty Development Center. We gave 15,000 additional, 6 additional awards to Rural Rotation and about $2,100 to the FDC. The total operational grant as of November was $4,793,192, which left $8. So that $8 was part of that reallocation amount. We funded 34 residency programs and for 880 residents at a per resident amount of $5,448 roughly. Total support grant again was $121,000, and the total faculty development center allocation was $102,110.62, with a total allocated amount of $5,017,102.62. Now, now that we've approved the additional program, Assumption B will be what we'll look at. This supports the residency programs at the 2021 level. So that was 34 programs, and then we will add an additional program to this scenario. The differences in the three are the FDC support breakdown. Option 1B starts us at $100,000, and we scale down that $50,000 and $0 for option B. That will be supporting 35 residency programs for a total of 904 residents, and the per resident amounts will start at $5,027 at the full FDC support, and then it would go up slightly as you scale down the FDC support. So lowest being $5,027 and the highest being $5,137 with the additional program and 24 residents. We looked at a couple of different scenarios, options, but I think this was the fairest out of all of them, and this is what we have historically done. So this is what I've prepared here for you guys for discussion.
So go ahead.
Oh, thanks, Mike. This is Dana Sprudy. I just had a couple questions for Ernest, going back before we look at the assumptions. Were all of the additional rural slots used in that cycle? And then I just also had a question because there were about 15 more slots that were verified but not funded. So I was wondering why not everybody was funded if they were all we'd have to look back at the previous slide that you showed, but there were a few programs that didn't have all of their, under the certified. Yeah. So there were 13 that were certified, but not funded. So just why that was, and then were all of the additional rural slots used?
So the difference between the 893 and the 880 is the most likely the off cycle and folks that have graduated the program at the start of December. So the number certified comes in as the total number of residents, and then what we fund are the basically the difference of the off cycle and folks that have graduated already. So the true number is the 880 here. Rural rotation, we had 64 applications come in, but we're only able to fund 40 based on the recommendations and the funding at the time. We were able to add 6 more. So of course the other 12 or the other applications were not funded, but we're pending basically. So we had some cancellations and moved some money around, but as of right now, we're only able to fund 46 total for the year. We are on track to also fund 3 rural rotations. I'm sorry, 3 public health rotations. We've paid out 1 so far and are waiting for verification of the 2 others at the Scott and White Round Rock campus. Yeah, so that's kind of where we end up with the rural rotation and support grant allocation.
So the reallocation of those 6, those were all used then?
Correct.
Great. Okay. Thanks so much.
This is Louis. Ernest, on the, you said there were 60 requests and 46 fulfilled on the rural. Did I hear that?
Correct. 64 applications came in August, and we were able to fund or to approve 46 for funding. And as of now, I think we have 35 that have been paid out as of right now, and the remaining should complete by the end of the fiscal year, depending on when the rotation is completed.
Are we able to pick up many of those requests in subsequent years? Or are they like people that are coming in early in their training and then we can catch them later? Or are there people that we just don't get to have that experience that wanted it?
Based on funding, no. I mean, they're able to apply every year, but unfortunately, we're only able to fund what's approved by the committee and what funding allows. So a lot of times, in this last couple of years, we've seen more applications than what's approved. For a while there, we were under that amount, but it's picked up now. So now we're seeing more and more interest, and we're receiving more and more applications. At one time, we were receiving up to 90 applications a year. That came down, but now I think the interest is back, and we're receiving quite a bit now. So unfortunately, we're not able to fund all the applicants we get and approve.
Right. What I was curious about was if, like, somebody applies the first year and there's not enough money for them to do it, then they apply again the next year. They're still going back in the pool, that we pick them up later. Is that?
I mean, it's possible. Go ahead.
I was going to say it could be a mixed bag. Some people, you can do the rural rotation without funding. Now, some programs have trouble getting the residents release time to do that. But so it's probably a mixed bag. But I think if you miss it on one year, it's going to be busy the next year, at least over the last several years. Isn't that right, Ernest?
That's correct. And then timing is always an issue as well. Scheduling doesn't always work. So a lot of factors that go into that.
It's an important point, though, as we talk about funding schemes, because it is a well-subscribed program. And I know that Ernest is right. There was a time when it dipped down and we weren't getting all of the slots filled, but now we are. And so it's just something to keep in the back of your mind as we consider the funding scheme.
And for those programs that submit, high volume applications, I'm leaving it up to them to kind of rank them depending on what we're needing or what we have available on a slot basis by program. So as of now, I think we're funding 7 programs and the roughly 5 per program, roughly. Some of the larger programs might get 1 or 2 more. But each year we'll determine based on the number of applications we receive and how many programs, what's a fair amount, a fair share for everybody to receive at least, a certain number of slots. And then of course, for those larger programs, we might increase it 1 or 2, depending on what's available.
Right. And sorry, just one more question. Do we have information on the how many of those trainees who participate in the rural rotation wind up practicing in a rural place?
I think we do have that. Don't have those numbers right now, but I know there's, we do a lot of projections and key measures every year. So I could pull that if we do have that for last year and send out in the group. But that's something we do track because we're asked, I think, for it on an annual basis. So I'm pretty sure we have that somewhere.
You know, that'd be good. I think those are all key points to use to advocate for better funding. So I think that's good. That placement in a rural area in Texas is gold. And so that's great.
So I'm just, if I could chime in on this one, I just want to remind everyone that there is a rider to the Appropriations Act that establishes that threshold that of funding that can be expended on the rural rotations. And it's this next time around, it's at 119,955. So budgeting that around 115 or whatever you all decide is perfectly great. But we can't just arbitrarily go over that amount. So we always leave a little bit of buffer in there in case we have some extra money at the end, so we can manage that as well.
How does that jibe with assumption B, Stacy, the rider?
I'm sorry, Dr. Reagan, what?
So I'm looking, we're on the screen now is assumption B, and the support grant total for option 1B is 206,000. And you said the rider limits the rural rotation to, I think you said 115,000.
119 for the biennium. Oh, sorry, for each year in the biennium.
Okay. So
That's correct. And the support grant here total also includes FTC support. So the rural rotation and public health alone would keep us under that 113,000 threshold.
So would I be safe in assuming in assumption 1B that the rural and public health rotation would be 106?
That is correct. That is correct.
Okay. That was my question, is how does that fit in with that? That's the most generous option related to the support grants. And so we're okay then to adopt that. And that the rider information, that's kind of what I alluded to earlier, that we don't have total carte blanche. We can't say we're going to spend $4.5 million on rural rotations. There's specific rules around that. So we kind of operate within those confines. And I didn't really understand that before, but Ernest straightened me out on that deal. Okay, so let's talk about assumption B. We got 3 different options here. This has been the traditional format that we've discussed before. I watch Cindy's face as we talk about options 2 and 3, and she kind of has a chagrined look when we talk about dropping the funding to the FDC. But that's been the weight. I would make one observation that pretty substantial changes in FDC funding really don't have really big impacts on the per resident amount. I think we've talked about that before. You guys have been through this drill, but I'm going to stop and let you guys chew on this. What do you think? Observations or thoughts?
What did we give to the FDC last year? And Ernest pointed to one of these options, but I couldn't tell where his arrow was. Was he pointing to 2B as a starting point?
So Ernest.
So historically, we've allocated $100,000 to FTC. In years where we lost a significant amount of funding, of course, that came down significantly. At one point, we were not funding FTC, but lately, I think the $100,000 mark is where we've been at for the last few years. And that's what the committee has been comfortable with and have approved.
I think that funding that was held back was in those devastating years when we were way cut back. And then that was restored once the funding improved a bit. And it has been traditionally 100,000 now for a while, I think. Isn't that right?
That's correct.
It was 150 for in 15 and 16, I think. And then it went to 100.
Okay. Thank you for that history. And so I think the specific question Mark asked is which option was your arrow pointing to? And I think it was pointing to option 1B. Is that correct, Ernest?
And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to point on any option. That's just my mouse acting kind of funny. So no. These are the three options that are on the table, basically. And I'm not advocating for either one of them. That's for the group to decide. But historically, yes, 100,000 for FDC. And just keep in mind that I know this question has been asked several times in the last couple of meetings, trying to stay around that $5,000 threshold for the per resident amount. Right now we're right at the bubble with these options here, and that's adding the one program and the 24 residents. That will come down starting next year when there's, I think, one more program to consider. And then in 2 years, we'll have two other programs to consider. So we will be between the $4,500 mark and the $5,000 mark in the next 2 to 3 years. So that's going to be a significant chunk. And I know folks have been concerned with that number for some time now. Because now that's starting to bring us under 5,000, which for the last, two biennials, it's been between $5,500 and $6,000. With the addition of the new residents and new programs, we're getting close to that threshold. So I just want to keep folks in mind that will happen starting next year and the years after. We will be under that $5,000 mark. And those were some of the options we were trying to consider this time around, but didn't want to put them out there because they weren't, like I said, we were still above 5,000. So but things to consider for next year.
And that's not adjusting for inflation over the decades. So
No.
is there a, Cindy, could you, I know we've had some challenges with the COVID situation and working virtually, and could you just kind of highlight sort of how many participants you've had annually over the last few years, or how many programs that had participants in the program?
Are you speaking to Cindy Passmore to me?
Yes.
We graduated since we graduated. We have had 69 fellowship finishers, completers, 9 last year, 11 the year before. And without the funding, I don't know if we could have kept that number up. Our Chief Residents Conference, we just had 79 participants. Most of those were family medicine chiefs. We also include the coordinators and have now for 3 years. And that's a program that we subsidize Texas Family Medicine Chief Residents to the regular fee is $600 and they only pay $200. And I don't know if we can maintain that discount for the residents. We do that. If we do, it's at the pleasure of the TCOM dean. The GCAM fellowship will be the last surviving piece if we are cut. That would be the last thing we would cut. The other conference that we offer is the Family Medicine Leadership Conference. And I want to say there were about 50 participants this year. We did that virtually, and it was a nice conference. The feedback and evaluations support that. The year before, it happened so quickly on the heels of the lockdown that we didn't have any wherewithal to do that. But we're maintaining, if not increasing, the numbers currently. What would suffer, as I said, would be the fee for the Chief Residents Conference. And somebody like Mark Nadeau from San Antonio, who sends 5 or 6 residents, would be hit pretty hard by the additional $400 a resident. And the other thing is our outreach, that we go to family medicine residency programs or departments and don't charge any professional fees. We do charge travel and accommodations, but we're doing them all virtually now. So at this point, in any out-of-pocket expense, also the program assumes that. Is that answering your question, Louis?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. It's always been a very productive program, and I'm just glad to hear that. And do you anticipate you would continue with a virtual approach over the next year or two for the most part? Or I know
Well-
that kind of helps cut down on the cost.
It does. It does. What we plan for the GCAM fellowship next year is we have 7 sessions. The first one, which is in August, and the middle one, for lack of a better word, is in January, and then the final session is in June. And we will do those 3 face-to-face here on campus and have a completely hybrid program, with the other 4 sessions being virtual. That has a lot of advantages for the programs, the people that are sending the fellows, because they only have to pay for 3 travel. And that is the tuition. We've been able to keep it at $5,000 a year for the program, for the full training for each fellow. But there have been discussions about increasing that amount and increasing the number of fellows. And we have been gradually increasing that, but we're with the current staff and the space that we have, we're pretty much at capacity. We could add a couple more. I think I could handle 50, or we could handle 15 in the current space that we have, but staff is stretched pretty tight.
This is
I
Dr.
think
Schramm.
Damon had a, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Of the current, last year, the year before, what percentage of those were actually true family medicine physicians, and which ones are not family medicine physicians?
Let's see. I would say there'll be maybe 2 or 3 that are not. So maybe somewhere around the 20-25% rate that are not. Most everyone is. They may be geriatricians specializing in geriatrics or something, but actually family physician. I just had that document up that had the everybody's specialty for this last year. I think we had 2 internal medicine maybe, and we did have a family medicine ONMM resident, the 4th year resident, but with the integrated program.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Ernest, can you put the funding scheme back up?
So Mike, while he's pulling that back up, I did want to piggyback on that a little bit and give a shout out to the chief resident course. We ask a lot of leadership from our chiefs, and I'm happy and proud that we can give them some credible training. In the future, I'm going to prefer in-person. I think the team building aspects of in-person training for that particular conference have paid off for us, but we're very grateful for the virtual option, and the idea that it's cheaper to put on per person is certainly a compelling argument. So I think that's a conversation we can have as we go forward. But again, I just wanted to highlight the value that we found in that. I think if we gave the 100,000 last year, I would, as a starting point, suggest option 1B. I think that's had a payoff. And I just wanted to pick up, lastly, I want to pick up on Dr. Foxhall's inflation question. And if you take the $14,488 that we got per person in 2001 and go online into an inflation calculator, you get about $22,000 in 2020 dollars, based on like a 52% accumulation of inflation over the last 2 decades, which has not really been a high inflationary time particularly. So anyway, those are my points. Thanks.
Great points. And I think you guys are making the case for our lobby efforts through TFP and other venues to try and reestablish some of that funding, or make us more whole. And we're going to need that, I think, as we look at adding additional programs, as we've discussed. I do want to ask you, Mark, are you willing to make that a motion for approving option 1B?
Yes, I make a motion to approve option 1B.
And it looks like
1B.
Damon Strands is willing to be a second. So
I
have
will
a motion
second
and
that motion.
Very good. So on the table is option 1B. you'll see it there in front of you. It's giving the FDC support of $100,000 total support grants, 206 for a $5,027 per resident amount. Any other discussion about that motion?
Well, Mike, this is Fred Unger from Lubbock, Texas. I also want to support option 1B, but I also want to make a point that the FDC is such an important part of what we're doing here, and they've become one of the other graduate medical education programs. Really, it's another residency program within itself that does a tremendous job in getting us there. Any cutting in funding at this time, and it's hard for everybody. It's just not something that I think is acceptable at this point. What needs to happen as far as this per resident dollars? I know it's just another $104 difference between option 3B and option 1B, but it's $104. We just don't have very much money to go around as we speak. And yes, we have other programs coming up in the loop in another couple of years. And so what I would suggest is that we probably need to go back and have a discussion as to how we're going to include new programs into funding in the future, knowing that we're getting really, really tight on money. It was not set on stone that what we had decided a few years with our former chair was what was going to happen for the next forever. We can go back and review that document, seeing is it time for us to adjust if we're not going to get any more funding, or we may need to be more creative on how we get funding for the future. So as we are looking at this $5,000 probably dwindling down to $4,000 something per resident, if it remains the way it is right now, we need to really have a discussion on how to go forward. We cannot just use the same techniques and the same ideas that worked for us in the past when the future is changing extremely fast. We did not anticipate the COVID. We do not anticipate some of these changes that we're going through right now, even with the politicians funding us going forward. But we need to really just review that document, see if is it time to change the way we're making funding in the future. Or we're including new programs into the funding in the future.
I would agree with Dr. Unger's calculations. Looking at some of the new programs that are going to be coming on are from large national hospital corporations, which are really well funded. However, the funding does not trickle down to the program, and the programs unfortunately are having to rely on this money that we support them through the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board. So I would like to revisit that, maybe in a special meeting or session, to come up with some ideas on what we need to do to at least keep our funding as stable per resident for programs that really rely on that type of funding.
So we do have a section coming up later in the meeting where we'll ask for future agenda items, and we'll go ahead and accept that one as a good additional discussion point for our next meeting, so we can kind of walk through the thought process about that. I do think it is good to kind of cogitate on it and come back with some thoughts. The subtleties of why this money is so important for family medicine being an outpatient-based specialty, much of the training outpatient-based, much of the training funded through inpatient work, can get lost, I think, on legislature. And so I think it's definitely a good discussion point going forward about thinking about how we do this logically. There are different funding streams that need to be considered as well that are supporting training. And so lots of different ways to go at this, I think. We'll take that as an agenda item for our next meeting. Thank you. So other discussion about the motion on the table that's been made and seconded about adopting option 1B. Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of adopting option 1B for funding for fiscal year 2022, say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Okie doke. So we have adopted option 1B for funding for 2022. Thank you. That was good discussion, and it's an important area to consider. Lots of priorities out there and limited money. So good process of coming to a conclusion. Okay, I'm going to move on to our next agenda item, which is selection of chair and the vice chair. And we're going to start with the vice chair. Any nominations for the vice chair position for fiscal year 2022?
So just as a point of discussion before I make a nomination, I think this group has had some benefit from continuity in the leadership positions. Certainly Roland was in the lead position for a number of years. Fred and Mike have been our leaders for the last couple of years. I think this is really important work. I think we need to have somebody in there who really cares about this and is willing to continue to devote the time and is able to do that and energy to this. So I guess before we get the nominations, are both of you guys willing to serve again if nominated? If not, we should have a discussion about the rest of us.
So I am willing. This is an important topic. I live in West Texas. Most of our docs out here are family physicians in the rural areas. Feel really strongly about the importance of the program, and I'm happy to help continue to support it.
I'm here to serve. As long as I'm able to get up and these wheels can keep moving and you guys approve, I'll continue serving. This is an important part. Just like Mike said, this is what we do, and it's not just for us. It's an impact that goes on beyond our tenure. When it's all said and done, what we do here is going to affect many doctors and many communities of people for many generations to come. And so as long as these wheels can keep moving, I'll keep working.
I, for one, am very grateful for the efforts that you two have put in. So if you're asking for nominations for with the vice chair, I would nominate Fred.
Yes,
Second.
sir. I have a motion and a second for Fred Unger as the vice chair for the coming fiscal year. Any discussion or other nominations? Okay, all those in favor of keeping Fred Unger as the vice chair, say aye. Raise your hand.
Aye.
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 Congratulations,
you.
Fred. You're the vice chair for another year.
I've never gone unopposed on anything, so thank you, gentlemen. I've always had some very strong opposition.
Yeah, that's right. As tradition, I'll pass the gavel to you to do the elections for the chair.
Well, again, thank you very much, Dr. Reagan, for the opportunity, and thank you very much, members of this committee, for allowing me to continue serving as your vice chair. And like always, I'll keep working hard and making sure that we do everything that we can to keep all the programs going at whatever best level we can. So I will go ahead and ask for a motion to go ahead and approve anybody else apart from Mike Reagan right now. And you can actually nominate Mike Reagan for position. But if you have somebody else, you're welcome to go ahead and do that.
This is Dr. Strands. I'll nominate Dr. Reagan to serve as chair.
Second.
Any opposition? Any discussion on that matter? This is such an important seat. Okay, so let's go ahead. If everybody approves, or if there's any opposition, go ahead and vote. For those voting yes.
Aye.
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 Okay, Mike, again, you've gone unopposed. I don't know if that's been your trend in the past, but congratulations. You are continuing on as chair of this committee.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate the opportunity to try and champion our cause. I think it's always great to have a good cause and a cause that maybe has some long odds against it. We're sort of the comeback kid sort of story. And so family medicine is near and dear, of course, to my heart. And I think it's important for Texas. And so I'm proud to be a part of this committee and to represent y'all. look forward to continue to do what we can to try and improve the funding to support these very important programs. So I think we're down to agenda item 8, which is consideration discussion of future agenda items and meeting dates. So we've heard one discussion already about considering a good discussion about where we sit and where we're projected to be over the next several years with funding per resident. As Ernest suggested, we project that we may dip below that sort of critical 5,000 per resident amount. And so we'll put that on the agenda for the next meeting so we can talk about that in more detail. I think we'll also want to connect with our societies to try and push forward on some work to try and improve that funding at the legislature. And so any other items that we want to consider? Dana, you have some?
Well, I think, and it was mentioned already, but just outcomes for the rural, for those that receive rural support for rural rotations and what those outcomes are.
Very good. Yes.
And then also just numbers on training for like how many participants for faculty development and for the participants for chief conferences, just so that it's understood the exact numbers that are being served with those dollars. Because it's reflected by everybody else. It's like those are the faculty development center and the services they provide are really essential to developing young family medicine leaders and their professional development. So, but I think if we could tell the story about how much impact there is, it would be helpful for maybe moving the bar for supporting it financially at the legislative level.
A good thoughtful approach to that is right. And at full disclosure, I was a graduate of that program. Many of us were graduates of that program. And so I think getting a good report, Cindy Passmore can help us with that in terms of making the case for what good work they do. I think that's important. I do wonder, remind me, do we query and find out where the graduates of the programs are practicing? I seem to remember we used to do that. Is that still something that's done? Graduates, not of the faculty development center, but of the residency and where they're practicing in like 5 years. Is that still done?
We have the ability to do that. I don't know that we've done that in the past several years, but it is probably a good time to take a look at it. This is the time to begin to develop preparing for the next legislative session, if you will. The work starts now.
Yes.
There's also information you can easily get from the program directors because we all know where our former residents are, and we can forward you the information very quickly. I have all my residents here behind me, and I know where every one of them is and where they're practicing. I keep in touch with them pretty well. So if that's information that we can help you out with, I think that would be great.
Fred, do they live in fear you're going to show up and knock on their door?
Well, I always show up, that's the same problem. That's the reason why my kids did not go to Texas Tech, because Dad, you have a tendency to just show up. If I'm paying the bills, I can show up anytime I want to. But it's kind of nice to whatever direction I go right now in any rural community around West Texas, I can find one of my former residents. So that's just a great feeling.
All right.
40, we got 45 years plus of grads. I don't know where they all are, but I know where a lot of them.
Well, I think it would, thinking about the next legislative session, having some of that data about how we train them here and keep them here is always a good message to have. So that'd be good to be ready for. Any other agenda items that we want to consider at our next meeting?
Yeah, this is Lewis. I think I just want to second that idea that we want to try to collect as much data as we can on outcomes. So, where people are going and how many are staying in the state, I think is really a critical point that, if Stacy and her team can do that, great. If, or else maybe we should ask the programs kind of, as part of the annual report, what's happened to your crew. I know everybody loves to fill in more blanks, but somehow I think that's really an important thing to be able to do, and then to even array that according to legislative district or whatever, so people can kind of see the impact of all this funding on their constituents. And I think, it's this whole idea of the funding, I think, is really critical as we're kind of reaching the, even in, unadjusted dollars, we're kind of dipping down to the threshold of where, it's, really getting more and more worrisome. So any other information we could, if we're going to have a session, just kind of talk this through, any other information we could get on, how other states do this, might be interesting. How, what other programs are being funded by our state and at what level in the primary care field. And to think about what potential public-private partnerships might be out there. So there could be sort of natural alliances with TASP Foundation or TMA Foundation in the rural or public health rotations, as well as the Faculty Development Center. Possibly, we talked about the hospitals. Certainly rural hospitals might, have some, they don't have any money either. So I don't know, they would, but even if chipping in a little bit just for general principle might be a nice thing to show to the legislature. And then our good friends in the health plans who always seem to have lots of spare change around, that the efficiencies of care and the benefits to patient care from family medicine and primary care in general, I think, are huge in maintaining good health of their health plans members, as well as cost related issues. So anyway, I just think maybe we just need to kind of put our thinking caps on and maybe think about, who else might be out there that could potentially contribute to the cause, and then how in the world we would go about doing that. I guess we could start a GoFundMe page or something. But,
man, that works like hotcakes in some things.
Well, yeah,
so maybe,
I'm thinking that, or we need an app or something. You got to have a gimmick anymore. But anyway, no, seriously, I think if we can kind of think through that, and at some point maybe talk to our colleagues and our various affiliated organizations about whether we might request an interim study on funding for primary care training for the legislature. So that might bring some focus to it, and possibly be able to generate some new ideas, or at least bring more awareness to the challenge that we're facing.
Yep, absolutely. So hearing no other items, I think I want to move to our last item, which is future meeting dates. And Ernest, you want to help us?
Mike, could I ask one question? It's Cindy Patmore. We're doing a full alumni survey, and if there's anything beyond what we would typically ask, like, are you still in academic medicine, to describe the area that they work in, the kind of patients they have, how they've disseminated what kind of academic work they've done or scholarly work. Are there any other questions that you all would like us to ask? And if they are, you can send them to me or shout them out now.
So Cindy, I think you said you're asking them about other things besides what's strictly, like they're teaching medical students and other teaching. You're asking about all that sort of stuff, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Retention in academic medicine is a question that we always ask about, and publications and that kind of thing. But we sometimes get into the HIPSs and MIPSs and all of that, which is good information to have also.
Yeah, I think that, the underserved areas, that'd be good, and certainly the location of where they are. Okay. Any other items we want to hit on for our next meeting? Going once, going twice. Okay. We're going to move to the meeting dates, future meeting dates. Ernest.
Okay, so in non-session years, the committee typically meets once a year. But normally it's a fall and a spring right before the board meeting. But taking into account, the difficult decision we have to make in the next coming years, we could plan for 2 meetings, maybe one possibly November, early November, and then schedule one for either April or May prior to the July board meeting of next year to finalize, the decisions made on funding and whatnot. Because we will have to discuss and consider new programs, and then of course funding scenarios that we could possibly work out potentially in November if we do have a November meeting, and then leave the spring meeting for the final decisions and final discussions and iron out any details we may have to. Because we're going to have to make some tough decisions. We have a lot of work ahead of us the next coming years, but we'll do our best to get you the best information to make those decisions. Wednesdays seem to work good for the group, the 10 to 12. Sometimes we could run into timing issues, so I'll try to make sure that our agendas are appropriate to allow for enough time for the updates and critical agenda items. So I will take that into account next time. I know our last meeting ran a little late with some of the updates, but we'll make sure that we'll structure that in a way that is beneficial for everyone.
And Ernest, is the plan for the meetings to be virtual still?
I am not 100% certain. I know we're doing some hybrid stuff with the agency and some of the board meetings. I just don't have a clear indication of what will be required, in the next couple of meetings. Stacy, do you have an idea of if the virtual is still okay for our next meeting or so?
So yes, the virtual is okay as long as the governor's proclamation or declaration of emergency is still in order. And it is. So that has not been rescinded yet. So we're still free to meet virtually in this space. And I think for this group, it works particularly well. So I know getting a quorum in the past has been difficult because traveling to Austin for a 2-hour meeting is not the most efficient use of folks' time. So I recognize that the Zoom call is for a meeting is, especially of a group this size, is really great. It provides a great opportunity to for everyone to see everyone, and for the public facing to see us as well. So I'm in favor. But as Ernest said, we may be able to move to something hybrid in the future as well. All good, fun things to learn.
So I will send out some surveys on a couple of dates for maybe the November month, and some for either April or May for a 2-hour meeting, and maybe several different options on 2 different weeks. But I'll get that to you guys here shortly in the next couple of weeks to get everybody on board with that.
Is everybody agreeable with 2 meetings? We're good. I see some nods. Is that all right? We're good?
This is I'm just curious if we want to have this funding discussion as part of a regular meeting, or if it would be helpful to have a separate session just as that is the topic.
I think if we have 2 meetings, one of the meetings could be pretty much focused on that, I think.
As far as the November dates go, I think it probably have to be the 3rd or the 10th. I think you get closer to the holidays. I think people start running into other issues.
Totally agree. Absolutely.
Mike, just a suggestion, there's power in numbers, and the more people we have, as much discussion as we can generate from members of this committee is very, very important. I've also noticed that there's some people that are on this committee that have not attended any meeting here lately. And so we need to reach out to them, see if they want to continue serving, because we may have some other people out there that can help us actually generate more ideas and more discussions and stuff like that. And if these guys are just not able to serve anymore, I think it's time to let them know that we can actually move without any hard feelings. Just we can find other people to replace them.
Yeah, good point, Fred. I think it's we ought to probably look at the attendance roster. Ernest and I can do that and kind of see where we sit. Because I think you're right. Memory serves, there have been some gaps for a while for a few people, so that's good. All right, so our action plan is that Ernest is going to send some meeting dates out for early November, avoiding the holiday period. Then we'll plan to meet again in the spring. That'll be the spring one will be the decision-making activity. All right, any other items that the group wants to hit on today?
Dr. Reagan, just to remind the committee, these recommendations will be submitted and forwarded to for the board in July, July 21st and 22nd. So the July 21st date is the committee meetings, the cause meeting, where the committee would present the recommendations to the board for approval. And then those final recommendations would go to the board the following day for the full board meeting on the 22nd. Am I correct, Stacy, on those dates?
I'll be attending virtually to present those recommendations on behalf of us. And so that'll go forward in July. Presumably we'll move forward without any hitches, we hope. So really we're down to the final item of adjournment, I think, unless anybody has any other information.
I just want to say thank
Talking to
you.
everybody. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Well, Cindy, thank you for the good work you and your team do for the state and the programs. It's very valued, and so thank you.
Also want to thank the
Did you have a
committee for
point?
your, just want to say, I want to thank the committee also for the hard work that you do, that you serve your community, of course, and the great work that you do for the state of Texas. We appreciate that for your time. And again, we'll do our best to get you the best information possible to make those tough decisions next time around. So again, thank you very much for being here this morning. We appreciate it.
Ernest, thank you for all the work you do. You're well prepared, and we appreciate that much. Mark, did you have a point you wanted to make?
No, I just was making the point. It's really fun to talk to everybody. That's all.
So maybe next time I'll book a goat for us. What do you think? All right. Do you have a motion for adjournment?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
A motion and a second. All those in favor, wave bye. So we'll see you later. Have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, bye.
Live with their
Stay cool.
thanks.
Stay well, stay healthy.